What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Thank God it's Monday podcast. Today we have a very requested guest, also by you guys, operator Starsky, friend of this channel. I was also a guest on his channel doing the live stream a couple of weeks ago, so before you forget, go ahead and check it, subscribe to his channel. We're very excited to have you here. Welcome. For those of you, very few of you guys who do not know operator Starsky, can you please introduce yourself? Just tell us what you do.
Hello, my friend. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure and a privilege to see you as well as your viewers. My name is Operator Starsky. In the offline, people know me as Andrew from Ukraine. I was a military for almost 10 years. I served as a policeman. I served as a National Guardsman in the 4th Operative Brigade of the National Guard called Rubish. We were defending Hostomel during the very first day. I had multiple combat deployments to the front line since 2015. Since last year, I work in Europe. I work on my propaganda study institute, which is aimed at fighting disinformation, not only disinformation that is produced by Kremlin, but also disinformation produced by other authoritarian regimes, China, North Korea. We have projects upcoming on those as well. So basically, that's me. Again, it's a big pleasure to be here on this channel.
More than welcome. We are very excited to have you here. So thanks so much for joining. It's Saturday morning when we're recording. You guys watching this on Monday. So yeah, you did mention you were fighting since 2014, almost all the way until 2015, I think you mentioned, right? All the way until 2024. Since we viewers here on this channel are very interested in what is going between Russia and Ukraine, I can pretty much even see this question for many of you guys. I'm just going to be your voice. Can you please tell us if whatever is allowed for you to say, whatever you feel comfortable saying, can you please share us your experience fighting in the war, especially in the Hostomel Airport, the very first days of the invasion?
So I would probably start with 2015. I joined the Special Force Police Battalion called Kyiv 1. It was partially based on former policemen, former Special Force policemen from Ukrainian regiment known as Berkut, which was really controversial because Berkut was involved into many atrocities committed against the protesters at the Maidan, at the Revolution of Dignity. But again, those were different people. There were those who supported Putin. There were those who ran to the occupied territories and continued fighting against the state. And then there were those who were dedicated to their pledge to Ukraine, and they continued defending Ukraine as true policemen. So those were the people that my battalion consisted of, and the rest were mostly volunteers, mostly protesters from the Revolution of Dignity, and those worked together. Really, it was an extremely interesting community because yesterday we were literally fighting against each other. We were throwing stones at each other, shooting each other, and today we were fighting against the common enemy, against the Russian invaders. So I had 3 deployments to the Donbass during my service in this battalion, and we had several close contacts, I would say, with the Russian hybrid army that back then consisted of local separatists as well as ethnic Russians who were on the Donbass, and regular Russian troops as well. We operated in the so-called Sector B of the ATO, anti-terrorist operation that was taking place in Donbass. Geographically, it was Mar'inka, Krasnogorivka, Kurakhove, Verkhnyoturets, Pisky, that area. And that time, I would say that Pisky and Krasnogorivka were probably the most dangerous spots, I would say. Avdiivka was the most dangerous spot, Pisky, because they were so close to the Donetsk airport. Krasnohorivka because Russians were trying to shell us every single night. And Mariinka, since the moment when Russians launched their attack, involving several Russian brigades, involving the notorious Petnashka, they basically captured partially the village of Mariinka. I could not even call it a town. It was basically like big village. So they captured partially this village, and then we counterattacked. My battalion, together with National Guards, together with our armed forces, primarily artillery, that was covering us big time. And we have eliminated quite a few terrorists. My battalion, during that combat, we lost several guys wounded, but they recovered, so everything was okay. I cannot even call it a loss, pretty much. And then we worked basically as a patrol police, but we had a bit different functions as a patrol police, specifically in the Donbas area, because we were conducting, I would call it, filtration measures. We were checking the cars coming and going from the occupied territory. A lot of people were trying to bring some forbidden things, of course, weapons and some kind of literally propaganda newspapers from the other side. There were such cases. People that were connected with terrorists. I had many hours interrogating people that had contacts with terrorists from Vostok Battalion, closely related to them, and they operated on our territory as well. We were interrogating and, of course, detaining people that were involved in terrorist attacks, people who were coordinating artillery strikes on the Ukrainian controlled territory. So there was a big workload for my battalion. And then, after a while, I joined the National Guard, 4th Operative Brigade. It was the very first completely professional National Guard unit that was created involving the NATO standards. The training was conducted by our instructors from different countries like Estonia, Finland, United States, United Kingdom. We had a lot of guys from there. We worked with in the frames of Unifier mission, that is Canadian-Ukrainian military mission. They train our guys. I think that they still keep training our guys despite the war. So it was extremely interesting experience. I joined as a private. Later, I was offered to become a sergeant. I was basically selected as a sergeant. I went to the sergeant school in Zolochiv. And after that, I spent several years as a sergeant. First, I was a platoon sergeant and a company sergeant for a while. And later, 2018, my commander learned that I had degree in communications and big background in communications and things like public relations. So he asked me whether I want to become a press officer for the brigade. And basically, I decided that it's a good idea because I had such experience. I would feel cringy if someone else took this place. Okay, because I'm very jealous when it comes to communication. So I decided to agree, and since that time, I worked as a press officer for my brigade. In 2022, basically, I was there with our officers and the supply battalion at Hostomel. I would say more than 95% of my brigade back then was already deployed in Donbass. So Hostomel Airfield and our base, they're neighboring. They were defended by literally 3 platoons of young conscripts, the guys that we don't involve in combat usually. They are commonly used as our supply troops, which is patrolling the base, helping at the kitchen and things like that. So they were there. the professional, the combat units, the hardcore guys, they were on the east with our tanks, with our artillery and everything else. And those were the guys who were basically fighting the elite Russian paratroopers and Spetsnaz at the Hostomel airfield. But of course, their secret was that they passed the same training as our infantry, as our professional guys. The reason for that is that 20% of all of our conscripts, they would usually sign contract eventually, because we offer normal employment, good conditions. We offer salary which was much higher, I would say, than in other units of the National Guard, including the mechanized units like ours. Literally because we had more training, more experience. We had, I would say, higher motivation as well. So the conscripts would often sign contracts, and in order to avoid, you having to pass the same training over and over again, we would teach them how to operate weapons, how to work within an infantry platoon. So they already had that experience, and it's not like Russian conscripts, for example, shooting 3 rounds during their whole service. They had a very, very good experience at shooting. They would constantly go to the training ground and stuff. So us, the officers, the staff officers from the HQ, and these guys, we were basically fighting approximately between 250 and 350 Russian paratroopers that were landing there, using their attack helicopters, Mi-24, Ka-52, as a close air support. And we also had a tiny number of anti-air guys from our brigade, armed with man-pads. We had several Zu-23-2 anti-air cannons. And that's where we took that combat, the very first combat on the very first morning of the Russian full-scale invasion. And it was an interesting experience. Unfortunately, we ran out of ammunition, but if we had enough ammunition and we would continue fighting, I think that there could be a big chance that we would defend our base, we would defend the airport. The biggest result of this combat was that Russian Spetsnaz was supposed to capture the airfield and make sure that Russian cargo airplanes landed on the airfield, deploying between 3,000 and 4,000 Russian troops that would later develop their attack, their advance towards Kyiv. And because they were involved in enormous combat against us for several hours, those airplanes couldn't land there. And eventually we used our artillery to strike the runway at Antonov Airfield, rendering it useless for cargo airplanes. I have information that one of the airplanes eventually that very evening circled around the airfield trying to land, and they were unable to do that. So that is why that huge 50-kilometer long column coming from Belarus to Kyiv, that is why they failed so much, because they had to make all their way by land, and during that march, they were ambushed, they were hit by Bayraktars, by our aviation, artillery, and eventually their attack on Kyiv failed. They basically weren't really able to cross the Irpin River and encircle the city, which, in my opinion, they had absolutely not enough men to do that. The whole number of personnel involved in the very first months involved in that initial invasion, was something around 2,000 men. 2,000 men along the whole span of the front line. 2,000 men would not be enough to take Kyiv, I think. and those were stretched along the whole front line, and those were 2,100 men in general, in total, right? Because actively involved troops, the number of actively involved, the number of the very infantry was even smaller. I would say approximately 50, 60,000 men. I don't count Russian conscripts because they are not warriors whatsoever, but literally the contract soldiers, the infantry, between 50 and 60,000 men. Those were completely not enough to take a major city, especially a city like Kyiv, even if they were there. So that is my story. I personally was involved in shooting the Russian helicopters over my base. They were circling over our heads constantly, shooting the unguided rockets, shooting their automatic cannons. It was nasty. It was a very, very intense combat, I would say, because you had to constantly search for cover. They were circling everywhere. A lot of them took part in this attack. According to the information we had that very day, approximately 35, 40 helicopters were involved besides the cargo helicopters. But according to the information that we received later, more than 100 helicopters were actually involved. We just couldn't see them all because a squadron of helicopters would arrive, shoot all they had, and then they would shift with another portion, and those waves would just come over and over again. So we could interpret, those helicopters as being the same, but helicopter has just so much ammunition that it can spend very, very fast. It cannot fight for several hours straight, so it has to be changed with a different helicopter that has the same amount of ammunition. And also, when our commander gave the order to our guys, our conscripts, to withdraw from the airfield, they were basically withdrawing through my position. So I was also covering them from the Russian Spetsnaz. They kind of made an attempt to take control over our base, but they didn't went further than the main gate and my position. So they were there. They took control of those areas, but they didn't go further apparently because they were not sure if it's a good idea. So that's the story.
Very descriptive, very many details. I personally do think that the battle for Hostomel was not one of the most, but I would say the most important battles, in my opinion, once again, of this whole entire invasion, because yes, should Russians have succeeded, the door to Kyiv is pretty much wide open. Like you said, they have the runways to bring their cargo planes, bringing thousands of troops every single hour. So yeah, I did even a specific video, whole separate video, just talking about the most important battle, the battle for Hostomel. Did so much research, and now listening to you, the actual participant of these defenses, pretty much confirming all the facts I was able to find, piece together one fact from here, one fact from this article, and now you just tell me all this, tell us all of this, just confirming that is how it happened. It was just like living through the moment.
I would say that back in those days, back that very day, we didn't really think about that because generally every combat is important to you, especially because if you are a participant, the result of this combat directly decides whether you will live or not. That is why it's kind of important to you personally. But to us back then, we didn't really think about it. It's just later, after weeks passed, I think, we started realizing and combining the pieces together. The journalists were also saying the same, that guys, you did something so important, and we were like, we didn't know. We were just doing what we had to do, right? There were Russian invaders landing. There were 3 groups of Russians landing, 2 groups across the runway, 1 group in the fields north from us. and we were doing what we had to do basically. So only later, of course, when you see when you learn the details about such events, when you again combine the puzzles, and you realize that actually it was very, very important. But on the other hand, comparing that battle, which again it was really intense, the helicopters, constant threat from the air, constant, and comparing to what our guys faced, for example, in Trochizbenka, in Rubizhne, in those areas, I would say that to me, that was probably an easy walk, because Rubizhne, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, those areas where rest of my guys were stationed and fought. Bakhmut later. After Bakhmut, they fought in the area of Liman, and I lost plenty of my friends, unfortunately, due to the Russian missiles. Comparing to that, I think that I was lucky in Hostomel, because those guys went through hell. Some of my friends would return from Bakhmut. I would talk to them. I would get them for like an interview, and they could literally barely talk because they had so many shell shocks, so many contusions. So they would stutter, and I could not even make a proper interview because they would stutter all the time. And eventually, it would take like a month or two for a person to learn how to talk again properly. So those guys are true heroes in my eyes.
I agree 100%. That is, yeah. War is horrible for both sides. So yes, that is like nothing else even to add here. Like I cannot imagine. I do have some friends who involuntarily went there, this conscription in September 22. Also have some friends dying, like for you are the enemies, for me are my friends, because that's how I see them. I don't see them as Russian soldiers. I studied with them, and then they had a knock on the door. I don't know if it's the same in Ukraine or not, but in Russia, yeah, like once you have this military enlistment, people see you in person and hand you this draft notice in person. That's it. Like you're criminally, legally obliged to show up, and basically they just take you and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, unfortunately, the toll is on my side as well. So yeah, I completely understand you. That is devastating, to say the least. So you did say that some of your friends, I'm assuming, they're still fighting in Ukraine from your 4th Brigade. So I'm assuming you also keep in contact with them. What do they say about the situation? What is right now? What's the sentiment on the front lines right now?
The main tendency is that we're growing the drone units, right? We are growing the drone battalions, the battalions of drone operators. We are growing our capacity in terms of drone warfare, and of course, everybody on our side realizes that it's already a game changer for us. So we are growing our drone muscles, so to say. And yeah, of course, I keep contact with my guys. Actually, I help them fundraise for the drones, because the situation with our American allies is completely not. It's completely hard to understand. To call it softly, right? So we understand that there might be a risk that if President Donald Trump eats a bad hamburger and or watches a bad movie or wakes up after having a bad dream, there is a risk that we may lose some crucial artillery munitions as a result of that, specifically 155 millimeter shells. That is why I am fundraising for my brigade. We want drones that will be basically saving lives of my soldiers, of my friends, of my brothers and sisters there. So if you check my channel description in my live streams for those fundraisers, and generally I would put it in the description for my channel itself, you will learn how to help my brigade as well, and I will highly appreciate that.
Yeah, so feel free after the, for you guys who are watching this, so all the links will be down below in the description. Just for you, just send me the links. I will put them in the description as well. So you will be able to find all these links, read the material, donate if you want, guys. Everything will be down below. No problem with that, obviously. So yes, another then question, probably since you've been actively involved since 2015, so you did also, obviously, without a doubt, went through the whole entire stage of Crimea annexation. Maybe you did not experience it personally, I guess, but you obviously went through this whole thing. Unfortunately, as of right now, I guess Russians are way too deep into the peninsula, and obviously the main priority right now is the east of Ukraine. Main focus is the east of Ukraine, then comes the south of Ukraine, I'm assuming. So maybe that's why I'm also asking you this question, as since you're the Ukrainian representative. What do you think is the perspectives of this peninsula? Are Ukrainians thinking about getting it back at some point in the future, or it's like so far distant in the future, you're like, okay, let's focus on east and south first? What do you think you're going to be the fate of Crimean Peninsula for the future?
I think that the fate of Crimean Peninsula can change very, very fast. Within days. It's not necessarily for us to take like years or decades to bring it back, because, for example, when we take a look back at Kherson, Izum, Balaklia, big chunk of Kharkiv region. When our guys went there and liberated those territories, basically Russian defense back in 2022, 2023, it was shattered. It was falling down and collapsing so bad. And when you walk down the street in Kherson and you can still see those billboards showing like those amazing Russian photos and saying Russia is here forever, you realize that it's a lie. It's basically the same kind of lie that Kremlin is spreading every single day. So Russia is not forever in Ukraine. Russia will never own Ukraine, just like it couldn't hold the Kherson, it couldn't hold other areas that were liberated. I often receive a question from, for example, Russian trolls in the comments, like, how's winning going, right? They don't realize that in 2022, Russia controlled 28% of Ukraine's territory, basically like 1/3. Nowadays, Russia controls 19. So that is how winning is going. People must understand that Ukraine will return those territories. And the main reason why people think that, oh my God, it will be so hard, Ukraine will not be able to do that, that's literally propaganda. Because 2022, we've heard the same about ourselves, that you guys will collapse. 2 weeks, 2 more weeks, and you will just give up. Why don't you give up already? Because we will be very, very mad in 2 weeks. 2 weeks passed, actually 1,000 days passed. I can still hear the same statements made by Russian terrorists. Oh my God. I made that very first statement with our sergeant major back in 2022, I think in April, February. Was it April? March, I think even. I made an address to the Russian invaders, and immediately after that, I received probably the biggest number of death threats in the comments on YouTube in history. I think I had like thousands and thousands of comments from, angry Chechen men who wanted to decapitate me and feed me to the dogs. I didn't see that happening. I saw them burning in Bucha, though, that huge Russian column, including those Kadyrovites, but no. So there's a lot of propaganda going, a lot of propaganda presenting the Russian Federation as, this angry beast that cannot be defeated. you can talk to current Russian allies, which are known as Taliban movement, right? And they will easily explain you why it's not true, why Russia can be defeated, how they did it already one time, in the 80s. There's a lot of propaganda going on, and generally, you can also confirm as a content creator who fights against this propaganda that Russian propaganda is probably the strongest in the world. This is their strongest weapons. And they know how to utilize it very, very well. So there's always reality and always this Narnia that Kremlin is trying to, attract people to. In this Narnia, everything's fine, everything's going according to plan. Russian troops fighting in the outskirts of Lviv, basically, almost like driving Ukrainian troops out of Ukraine's western border, and Russia is undefeated. The reality is absolutely different. Russia is doing all they can, everything possible, to continue this pressure against Ukrainian troops, sacrificing thousands of soldiers on a daily basis for mere hundreds square meters of territory, losing enormous amount of vehicles. They lost majority of armored vehicles that the whole Soviet Union was producing over decades in order to destroy NATO, I don't know, dominate the world. They've lost all that. And the reality is that now they have to keep fighting in Ukraine using donkeys, using golf carts, using Chinese motorbikes. Golf carts, oh my God. Donkeys, it's like, is it even the truth? Does it even really happening? Yes, it does. $400 for a donkey, by the way, which I think is incredibly expensive. I think as for a donkey. So they keep throwing everything they can with barely any result. And for several years already, Frontline is stationary, even though Ukraine is fighting against world's second army that cannot do anything. Ukraine managed to stop Russian army. Ukraine managed to return a big portion of its territory. So we should remember that we should always make a difference between propaganda and real life. And we should always question the information coming from shady people on a YouTube with shady last names like Pool or Carlson, because they don't necessarily tell you the truth.
Yes, I was literally just about to make the same conclusion, like that Russia's strongest weapon is propaganda, but you just made it for me. Like, couldn't agree more. You said exactly the same words almost I was about to say, so I guess I can just make an analogy how propaganda strong can work and how can it influence minds of people. Like literally, like you can just put a sign, I don't know, on the door which says don't go in, there's some kind of chemicals inside, don't go in, there's like electrical box or whatever, even though the room behind the door is going to be empty. You just put the sign, people will see it, 99% of people will never even touch the door. But just because they are told not to go in, not to peek, not to question, because there is a sign, people will not just go there. Like, yes, propaganda is incredibly strong, very strong weapon. Putin been practicing it for like, what, 25 years at this point, so he is unfortunately a master of this thing. And literally, this is pretty much the only reason I would say the war still goes, unfortunately, because propaganda is so strong. Otherwise, there will be absolutely no support for the invasion in Russia. I can see that a lot of people, especially in big cities, Moscow, Russia, my friends, I also talked with them, they are kind of starting to ask the right questions, if you want to call this like this. Some people, they not wanting to go back to Russia until the war is over because they know this is like a ridiculous. At some point, they just can close the borders or whatever, or just get you just wake up ready to have your day, to have your breakfast. Then somebody's knocking on your door and saying, hey, come with us, we need to check your biological data. And next thing you know, you're in the truck to Donetsk or whatever. So yes, propaganda is extremely strong, and hopefully more and more people, at least starting with the big cities in Russia, will start seeing with their own eyes. So yes, that is the very big hope, fingers crossed. And another thing, couple more questions, and then one more question, and then the question of the interview, the one that everyone answers differently. So I'm very excited to hear your answer on that one. But first of all, so if Putin is not stopped by force, because at this point I think this is the only way to stop him. There are no negotiations, no peace talks that can convince him unless he gets whatever he wants, and then even more. So the only way, I think, in my personal opinion, is to stop him by force. But once again, if the war just either stalls completely or maybe pauses, or there is some kind of longer than 1 month ceasefire, several months, maybe a year or something, do you think after Ukraine, Putin will try to go further to some different maybe countries, Poland, Baltic states, or anywhere else? Do you think he'll continue, or he learned his lesson in Ukraine, that he's not as capable as he thought, and he'll just stop right here and right there?
There are several indications that confirm the fact that he will go further. I'm not even mentioning the fact that Russia is not Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union was strong, when Soviet Union was feared by the West, Ukraine was the core of its armed forces, literally, because Ukrainians were occupied by communists for 70 years, and we were the core of the Red Army. Currently, it's different. Currently, Russia is fighting against us, and Russia is not that strong without Ukraine. So, of course, if Ukraine capitulates, which I really, really hope will never happen, Russia becomes much stronger, probably tenfold stronger, which again, I hope will never really happen, because Russia will not only receive a lot of resources, important resources like food production, metal production, rare minerals, and things like that, but also strategic, I would say, control over the strategic regions like Carpathian Mountains that protect the new borders of the Russian Empire, from Romania, from Poland, from basically NATO countries, improving their strategic stance, and also they will receive access to the personnel that was trained, that received NATO experience, that knows how to fight as a NATO force, that knows how to operate Western vehicles and Western weaponry, and that would definitely make Russia stronger, much more stronger than it is today. But besides that, there are different indications that confirm that Russia is planning to invade European countries, regardless of what is happening in Ukraine. First of all, we can see deployments of bases, expansion of bases at the border with Finland, for example. They grow their military presence there. They rebuild the bases, including helicopter bases. So they will be stationing cargo and attack helicopters in order to be ready to deploy their troops within the next 5 years, according to the Finnish intelligence. There are multiple reports, again, coming from different intelligence agencies, Danish, American intelligence, pre-Trump version of it. Also Estonia, also Germany, they all say that before the end of this decade, there is a very, very high chance that Russia will try to invade some of the NATO countries. I personally believe that this invasion might look a bit differently, because in my personal opinion, Russia will try to act in a hybrid way, the way it acted in Ukraine eventually, which involves, of course, separatist movements, which involves ramping up the far left, far right marginal political movements in those countries, calling the population to exit NATO, exit EU, which basically opens the door for the following Russian invasion into those countries. And also destabilizing the partnership between NATO allies, which we already see happening, unfortunately. And I think they would act this way. Other experts, for example, General Ben Hodges, that I had a privilege to interview several months ago, he said that he has absolutely no he doesn't see any reason for Russia not to attack a NATO country, because they will be trying to probe the alliance, the strength of alliance today, the combat worthiness of NATO countries, of European allies. They will be probing them. They will be trying to understand whether the Article 5 is still even a thing nowadays among the NATO allies. They will be definitely trying to do that. And of course, we can see that the hybrid part of this is already being launched. We can see the tankers of the Russian Shadow Fleet disrupting communications in the Baltic Sea among the Baltic allies. So this warfare is already going. Then there is informational warfare that is again being ramped up now big time, because, for example, in March, Russia Today and Rossotrudenchestvo combined launched a campaign for journalists and bloggers around the world. They invited them to take courses in the Russia Today, based on the Russia Today. So basically, they are ramping up the ecosystem of Russian propagandists in Europe. This means that already these days, before summer, we will be seeing different tiny Tucker Carlsons and Tim Pools, popping up in European countries, not only in Europe, of course, but primarily in Europe, because this is Russia's primary target at this point. The countries that have strongest opposition towards the Russian authoritarianism, like France, like United Kingdom, we will see a lot of them popping up there and waging the informational warfare, spreading disinformation. So they already have the strategy to disrupt the unity of the European Union, of European NATO allies. This is a very, very big threat, probably some of the biggest threats, again, considering that Russian disinformation and Russian propaganda are the strongest weapon. And then we can see other indications. For example, they ramp up their production of long-range missiles that are not utilized to strike Ukraine. They are being stockpiled. We can see Russian strategy of indoctrinating the youth, because 20,000 Ukrainian kids that were kidnapped from the Ukrainian territory, they were brought to a network of Russian military camps for kids. For example, there are military camps for kids in Crimea, one very, very big in Volgograd called Avangard. That is a massive territory where the kids are basically taught how to operate weapons, how to operate within a unit, within a squad, how to conduct assault operations on the ground, how to infiltrate trenches and things like that. And those are basically teenagers. Big number of those teenagers come from Ukraine. Those are basically kidnapped Ukrainian kids that are later trained and indoctrinated as future Russian invaders. So all those indicators show that Putin and people after Putin, because he's not eternal, he will become a better person eventually. All those indications show that they are preparing. They have a long range plan of continuing their expansion, because Russia is an empire, and expansion is the only way for an empire to stay afloat and to survive.
Yes, I did not know about the kids, so thank you about this Volgograd camp avant-garde. Like, yeah, this is like, wow, like imagine how this is probably also one of the best examples of how strong the propaganda is. Imagine stealing Ukrainian kids from their own homes, land, from their families, and then brainwashing them so much that they're ready to fight against their own later. Like, that is how strong the propaganda can get. Another thing about Article 5, I think I did see it on the NATO website itself. Correct me if I'm wrong if you know this, but Article 5 says that if one of the NATO alliance members is attacked, the others need to do what they deem worthy in terms of support. So there is a misconception that if some NATO alliance member is attacked, everyone should just jump in and start war. But once again, like what is deemed worthy, for example, it might be just sending post-it note, like a birthday card saying like, sorry you got invaded, keep it up, we're here for you if you need us. So, well, some countries might think that this is worthy of the response. So that is the unfortunate thing, but yeah, just don't let Kremlin trolls know about this. And another thing that, yeah, propaganda, once again, yeah, like right now it might feel like that, yes, there are many indicators that Putin will continue beyond Ukraine, but at the same time, people think like, but how will he justify it? Well, look at us like 5 years ago or 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, when the Russian tanks were already stationed on the border, and everyone still almost never believed, almost until the invasion itself, that it is going to happen. Like, I mean, who is going to start an actual full-scale invasion in 2022? It's like 21st century. Come on, guys. But he still did it. Same thing right here. With like, he will find a way. He will find an excuse saying that, oh, like, Russians were killed in whatever, Estonia in 1952 or whatever. Like, he will find an excuse. You also said the hybrid warfare, when brainwashing the population, infiltrating their authorities like political parties, trying to make a right-wing, left-wing win, which is going to be aligned with the Putin's vision, and then slowly brainwashing the country from within. All these things are very real. It was, so to summarize, basically, it might not feel like it is possible, but one day you wake up and you're like, wait a second, how did we even get there? That's the
Brother,
perfect summary.
I
Yes.
think you can
Yes.
confirm this as well, because if you cannot justify your actions from a standpoint of law or like common sense or people's morale, you can create one, right? For example, from the standpoint of the international law, the invasion of Ukraine, of course, cannot be justified because it's a sovereign country, international recognized borders, member of the United Nations, and things like that. From standpoint of common sense and people's morale, right? Again, you cannot justify literally taking weapons, going to a different country, and killing people, for no reason, absolutely. So you can create the foundation of that. And this foundation in Russia is known as Ruski Mir, Наши, ours, which means that basically, yes, they commit atrocities in Ukraine, but they are ours. They are наши. They are Russians. So they are basically justified them. And this is why they have such people as Alexander Dugin promoting all that. This is why they have Jun Armia, the Putlerjugend, the youth that are again being raised as future Russian invaders. They have this foundation of. I don't know if it's proper to call it Russian nationalism. I would call it probably Russism. Which is basically this idea that we don't care. Yes, we are ugly, we're stupid, and we die in big numbers, but we will keep attacking because the Russia is great, and we have to like die for it. That is the ideology that is again very, very dangerous. And the other day we talked about it with Jonathan Fink, our common friend from Silicon Curtain. He said that this is a very dangerous ideology that I said that part, that actually the biggest threat of Russia towards the Western countries during the Soviet Union, it was basically communism, because there was a major communist party in every European country that posed a big threat to that country and to the unity of the European countries in general. And that is why a big opposition, a big resistance was made to fight back the communist ideologies and things like that. Nowadays, the ideology of Russians, even though people who promote this ideology, like Tucker Carlson, for example, recently he took interview. He interviewed Novinsky for his channel. That is again one of the pro-Russian criminals and oligarchs in Ukraine who ran away. People like him, they are not ethnically Russian, but they can be still carriers of this ideology because it doesn't have borders. And this is very, very dangerous. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, including some of the closest teammates of chief of current US administration, who carry this ideology as well. Stephen Witkoff, who has a long history of cooperating with Blackwater, which cooperated with Wagner back in Africa. They were close friends. And a lot of supporters of the Russian terrorism who literally have either some kind of connection or recruited or literally work for money because everybody has their price. It's a very, very big threat. There are a lot of carriers of this ideology, I don't know, in European countries as well. We can see that for some reason nobody can explain. For example, Trump administration supports all the wrong guys, the AfD party in the here in Germany, because AfD was recently recognized an extremist party. Last year, they discovered several Russian agents, spies. They discovered a Chinese spy in this party. The Polish Peace, which is again, it's a conservative party, I would say right wing, not extremist, but with several nationalist narratives in their program, who become again increasingly Eurosceptical and Ukraine skeptical. We can see the same in Romania, and a question emerges: why do they support all the wrong people? Like, what's wrong with them? But I think the answer is obvious, that Russianism can actually spread, and in my personal opinion, it must be stopped if we want to keep living in a safe, Western civilized environment.
Yeah, I can see it happening as well. You give even more examples, more and more countries, it infiltrates the brains because, yeah, coming back to the original thing that propaganda is the strongest machine. If he cannot win on the battlefields, then he will try to win over people's minds, as in as many countries as he can, to justify whatever he is doing. Like, yeah, that is precisely what's happening. And I guess now then it is time for the question of the week.
Oh my God,
like this.
I'm already scared.
Quick question, quick answer, don't overthink it, just whatever first things come to your mind, no need to even elaborate, because that is the thing. And well, the question goes as following: if you are in front of Putin, what will you tell him?
Kiss my ass.
That's it. Yeah, there you go. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Operator Starsky, the Russian dude. I'll put all the links down below. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to both our channels if you wish. And yep, see you tomorrow. Thank you.